My name is Marcus, and I'm here on behalf of Fracture Sounds to show you their latest blueprint instrument, bass guitar. And if you happen to be new here, Blueprint is a series of free sample instruments compatible with the Kontakt Player that are curated from Fracture Sounds' experiments and passion projects. Here we are on instrument number 16, which I am particularly excited about because this is the sound of a Fender bass guitar, recorded in the Nave by none other than the engineer at the Nave, Danny Blackburn. I'll show you through the controls really quickly, and then I'm going to play you a piece of music that I've written which demonstrates how this instrument sounds in context. Let's begin. So right off the bat, this instrument offers us quite a bit of choice when it comes to the sound of the bass guitar. Not only can we switch between a direct input and an amplified signal, we can also switch between a fingered and picked playing style. So you've got quite a variety of sound and tone to get out of this instrument. And whilst I'm on the subject of tone, let me start by showing you the tone control over here on the left, which is a well-engineered EQ curve to make the instrument brighter or darker. I need to stop playing in E because I'm going to keep playing that same song. B flat. By default, this is controlled by CC1 or your mod wheel, but you can set this to another CC of your choosing, which I will demonstrate with the next control, which is compression. As the name implies, this is a bit of inbuilt compression, which in my opinion brings out the natural warmth of the instrument and adds a little bit of punch to the transient of each note. I'm going to set this to a control on my fader box by right-clicking, learn MIDI CC automation, then moving the fader in question that I want to control this parameter with. Let me just bring it all the way down and then bring it up as I play. So yeah, it makes a bit more of a difference towards the top end where the instrument is naturally quieter. Our next control is drive, and this is only available on the amplified signal for obvious reasons, and when I switch to direct input, this obviously turns off. Again, I'm going to set this to a control by right-clicking, learn MIDI CC automation, and moving this fader here, and here's how this sounds. I am not and never will be a bass player, but I hope you'll agree with me, that is a very tasteful bit of overdrive there. I'm going to reset this by command clicking or control click if you are on Windows. Now let me just quickly show you the difference between direct signal and amplified signal, and again I'll just move around the tone controls as well at the same time so you get a feel for it. And now, I'm going to switch between fingered and picked articulation. This can be controlled with a key switch down at C-1. Unfortunately, I cannot show you that because I'm a hipster and it's a digital piano that I've got in front of me and it does not allow me to go down to C-1. So I'm going to set this to a MIDI CC of my choosing by right-clicking on this switch, learning MIDI CC automation, and my final fader is going to be to switch between fingered and picked articulations. Here's the difference between those on direct signal to start with. Lovely, and the same for amplified. Great stuff. The last thing to show you quickly is a couple of settings behind the scenes, which can be accessed by clicking these cogwheels here on the left. Before I do, I'm going to quickly put this on direct signal and picked articulation, so you can really hear the difference, because our first setting is release volume, which adjusts the volume of the release sample when you lift off the note. So if I turn this all the way up and play a couple of quite loud notes up here, and then bring it all the way down. And then the second setting we can adjust is the velocity response, and this changes the audible difference between loud samples and soft samples. So if I bring this up, the difference between loud and soft samples will be quite extreme. And if I bring this all the way down, the difference between loud samples and quiet samples, based on my velocity, won't be very much at all. And this can be a really nice alternative to compression if you want the volume of the track to remain consistent throughout a piece of music, but without actually adding compression. Again, I'll reset this by command and clicking and going back to the instrument page, and that is bass guitar in a nutshell. But there is more fun to be had, as you will hopefully hear in this piece of music that I've written, because I did have a little play around with pitch shifting this instrument up, not only 12 semitones, but 24 semitones as well. Here's how that sounds. So yeah, I had a bit of difficulty keeping up with Logic there, as it does have a habit of showing me kind of what I don't want to look at, and then I've got to switch between stuff and remember all my key commands, but hopefully you got the gist of that. I'll talk you through everything I've done with bass guitar first of all, and then I'll show you the other instruments in this piece. Notwithstanding a bit of live guitar, which I recorded in yesterday, which I'll play for you in a bit. I realised whilst watching this that I neglected to mention quite a big control, which again, because of my insistence on using a digital piano, I do not have access to, but bass guitar does work with your pitch bend wheel to give you a little bit of extra control, and you can see I used the pencil tool in Logic to just draw all of this in, but this is intended to obviously be a little bit of tremolo. A little bit of legato. Obviously not perfect, but it does mean that you can play around with that too, and it does mean that this is just a lot of fun to play around with. Unfortunately, I will never experience that because I refuse to get rid of my Casio. Anyway, let me move on now and go from top to bottom, starting with this first riff, which, as you can see, a bit of looping going on, pitch shifted up 12 semitones, and then in Logic I have added this tremolo plugin which pans it gently from left to right, a little bit out of time with the music, and then a bit of Logic's inbuilt tape delay, which is a great little plugin, adds in some sort of fluttering and warbly sounds that you might get in an actual tape machine. Here's how that all sounds together, and in my opinion this actually sounds really, really nice. The irony of this piece is that I actually neglected to use Fracture Sounds' blueprint electric guitar. It was completely intentional. I just didn't want to be too cliche, so that was why. And it wasn't that I just forgot. But yes, this is a nice guitar sound in my opinion. And here's what it does in the piece. It starts just playing this kind of repetitive. Using the velocity response, just set on normal, allows you to kind of dip the dynamics in and out, which is really nice in my opinion. And then in the middle of the piece, we vary it up with a few fifths, which if anybody's watched any of my previous walkthroughs, I'm a bit of a sucker for adding fifths in everywhere. This instrument kind of takes a bit of a backseat to our second bass guitar, which has the tape delay but no tremolo on this one. Pitch shifted up 24 semitones. If you listen to this, we're now kind of straying into the realm of sounding a bit synthy and not very realistic, but it's still a really interesting sound and in my opinion a little bit nicer than just using a synth, at least one that I could program. And this plays in tandem with an instance of Fracture Sounds electric keys, the very first blueprint, which plays this little background melody towards the end of the piece. Here's what that sounds like. And here's what it sounds like playing with the second bass guitar. So like a really nice plucky sound out of that. Now our two instances of actual bass guitar. First one is a live sound, which as you can see, I've turned up the compression on, but also used the mod wheel throughout the piece to adjust the tone. And I'll get back to the pitch bend there in a second. But yes, the tone is used especially in the intro for a bit more dynamic contrast. You can see that moving the pitch bend wheel up or down gives you one full tone from the note that you're currently on. So I've used that here to go up to an F from an E flat. Again, same here, kind of going down. Nice. Towards the end of the piece, this plays a little bit of counterpoint with an amped version of the guitar, which the controls left somewhat unchanged from the other version, but I brought the drive up, now that we're on amped signal, and switched it to picked articulation. So it's a nice different bass sound to our first one, meaning that when they play together, it sounds like two different musicians. Moving on to our first instance of electric keys, we have a chordal patch, which has got the chorus and the stereo spread turned right up, and on amped signal as well, matching the vibe of the piece, I guess. Some of Logic's inbuilt tape delay again there. There's a low cut on the delay so that we don't get the chords being all mushy, but we get that plucky attack sound from the Rhodes. Moving swiftly on, our next instrument is Epic Grand. As usual, I'm probably not going to earn many points for my compositional prowess in this piece, but this has a wonderful sound. I said it before in the walkthrough for this instrument and I'll say it again. I love what the mic mix does with this particular piano. It almost sounds like a completely different piano when you have it on far mics versus close mics. My personal favourite sound is close mics, and that's what I've done for this piece. Here's how that sounds. And you can hear that stonking reverb on there, which is, of course, Fracture Sounds' shimmer reverb, which I've cranked right up because it's my personal favourite. A couple of Atmos tracks here, one from Gentle Winds, which plays a couple of chords at the beginning. Whereas the other Atmos, which is Fracture Sounds' textural violin, again, soloed on its own. This is a more kind of airy, dreamy reverb with a bit of pitchiness to it. And so I wanted the kind of variety between the two. I didn't want it to just be one or the other. Drone tones throughout, bit of modulation here as well. and I'm sure the team are probably shaking their heads right now because I'm fairly certain when you have the Atmos soloed, the mod wheel does not do anything. With Fracture Sounds, there's such a great choice of atmospheres to choose from, and I definitely could have gone a bit more into detail with this. String sounds next. We got short strings and we've got gentle strings playing side by side. Now, originally I did try out teaming up gentle strings with an instance of string trio. I did that in the last blueprint and it worked really well. I found that the resonant bass in string trio wasn't quite right for this track. It was sort of like hanging on a little bit. So just gentle strings and short strings together, and here's how they sound. I feel like I say this every time I do a blueprint, but not my finest string writing. But when I've got quite a lot of riffs going on in a piece of music, like the bass guitar playing a riff and the synth riff from the electric keys and all this going on, I don't want the strings to be doing something really complicated as well, because otherwise you just hit with a wall of notes and you can't actually tell what's going on. Having the strings playing something simple allows us to focus on what the synth riffs are doing a bit easier. This, being more of a textural instrument, works really well. And on that subject, let's move on to another texture of sorts, but this time more of a percussive one, because in this piece of music I have a lovely instance of Fracture Sounds Blueprint Toy Piano. And as you can already see from that MIDI, this is Hans Zimmer level right here. Ooh. Even with just this one single note, the amount of variety and detail that Fracture Sounds put into this toy piano is unparalleled, and here's how that sounds. The daft thing is that even these sounds on their own sound quite great together. Not gonna lie, like even if I just put the bass guitar with this, it does sound pretty good. So that's how you can tell that this is a good bass guitar instrument, because even when you got nonsense like that and nothing else, it's still like The rest of our drum kit is divided up into tracks, more or less based on the order in which I recorded them, with a little bit of variety, mostly in mic mix. Our first track is a hi-hat track, which has one on the right, one on the left, with no room mic and the damping turned up to make it a little bit crisper. Our second is more of the same, but this time we've got a little bit of a woodblock sound and then a shaker as well, and here's how those two sound together. The way that I did the shaker was to record it in doing eighth notes, set the velocity, and then to copy and paste into 16th notes, but move the velocity down on the 16th to make it sound like a kind of natural egg shaker movement. I might not be an expert bass guitar, but I am an expert at the egg shakers. Third track is our kick and snare track, and as a result, all the mics back up again. We've got the hype turned up. The way that I've worked this is, actually, it's probably best if I show you here in the automation. The note velocity, ramped it up slowly throughout the piece, except for the kick drum at the start of each bar, so that it feels like it's kind of almost fading in as the track goes on. It's a great snare sample, that. Final track is just a little cymbal splash, and I've enhanced this, making it kind of as bright and airy as possible by turning up the hype, overhead mic only, and then some delay designer. Logic has a great thing inbuilt in its delay designer where you can transpose the delay taps up, so I've done that, and you can transpose them down as well, but yes, up to make it even brighter, and then panned around a little bit. Here's how that sounds. Last but not least, right down here at the bottom of the track, a little bit of glue to hold this piece together is some live guitar which I played in yesterday. Aside from putting compression and EQ on all of the recordings simultaneously within this stack, I also, on this track here, put on a bit of chorus pedal for a little bit more of a kind of indie, vibey sound. Is that a mistake? accidentally left that mistake in all this time and did not notice. Whoops. Well, I guess I've got to keep it in there now. But yes, that's the sounds used in this project. And like I said, had a lot of fun playing around with bass guitar. Well worth downloading it for that alone. But personally speaking, this is one of my favourite blueprints so far because, as long-time viewers of this YouTube channel will know, it means that I no longer have to pitch shift an instance of electric keys down by 36 semitones to get a fat bass sound. And you also do not have to pitch shift an instance of electric keys down by 36 semitones to get a fat bass sound because you can download bass guitar for free. Consider subscribing to this YouTube channel so that you don't miss any more vibey instruments in the future. And I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.